I'm so glad that somebody's out there yelling right now. Like, the most inopportune fucking time.
Did we get that on recording? Like that was like. So
I don't know if it picked it up. It'll show in post, I guess. That was pretty funny. Great timing, by the way.
I was like, what is wrong? What is going on at your house? Is someone getting murdered in your backyard?
I mean, I don't know, but let's let that segue into death.
Yeah.
It's the worst segue ever.
Yeah, well, let's not use that as a segue then.
No, we're not going to do that.
We've already recorded the intro and the outro, haven't we?
Yeah, we don't need to do an intro and outro. But let's just do it. All right, welcome to the In.pencil podcast. I'm Adam.
And I'm Jess.
And we're here to talk about dying. So strap in and be ready to be miserable because this episode's about death and it's going to be depressing. Probably not, actually. We got some things to say about it.
Never forget, there is life after death and taxes.
The Reliant K references keep flowing in.
Always. Did you see that Goatee Records put out on, I can't remember what it was, you only picked 3 and it was Reliant K albums?
Yeah.
This is not an easy topic to start. So.
This is not an easy topic to start.
So we, like everyone else, know someone who has died.
I know a few people who have died, and even more, I know more people that probably will die at some point in the future.
That's true.
In fact, you might even say that death is inevitable.
That is very true.
But it's one of those things that like people just don't like to talk about or acknowledge.
No.
It's like the elephant in the room of life. Like,
I mean, yeah. It's also like in the scientific community, such a weird topic where you'll have people saying we should fight death and other people we should accept death. Like the idea of living forever is something we should try to achieve.
Right, but there's politics and economics around reasons why it's unrealistic and unreasonable to expect people to live forever. Because if reproduction rates continue and death rates drop, then there's going to be a population problem at one point or another. Now, whether or not the planet is overpopulated at the moment seems to be a point of contention among different species of people. But at some point, yeah, I mean, if you stop people from dying, or if you prolong life to a certain extent, especially if they're to the point where they can't sustain themselves or take care of themselves or contribute to the economy or contribute to society, then at some point you are just burdening the system more or less.
Yeah. And well, there are a few things like only rich people could do this because it costs money to live. There is a reason why when you look at it, U.S. presidents tend to live to at least their 80s.
Yeah. There's some of those start being president until they're 80.
Well, that's true. That's true. Our choices recently have been very much old people.
Yeah.
But people are like, why do presidents live so long? It's because they're freaking wealthy.
Yeah.
We've only had like a few non-wealthy presidents ever.
Well, that's the thing. Rich people, no matter if they're president or the CEO of a business or no matter what it is, an actor, like they can afford to live longer because they can afford the right healthcare that they need to live longer.
Yeah.
Whereas average people, if you live to 70, you're lucky, more or less. For those of you that don't know, she has a cat next to her, and the cat's like looking at the camera menacingly, a little bit judgy, honestly. And I don't like cats, so. But
I'm just gonna put it on the cat cam that none of y'all can see.
We should, you know what we do? Take a screenshot. Oh shit, never mind. I was gonna say you could take a screenshot and we'll use that on Instagram as like our promotional photo for this for this fun
Yeah,
episode of the
let's not.
podcast. Completely unrelated, but it's probably less morbid than what we're gonna use anyway. Which I don't know what we're gonna use yet. But yeah,
How
rich people
about
can afford.
Casper?
What's that?
Casper.
Casper is a great idea. Rich people can afford to prolong life.
Yes.
Most average people can't, especially well. I was going to say not in this country, but also in pretty much every other country, because the healthcare systems aren't meant to sustain life into 80s, 90s,
Yep.
hundreds. At some point, people just give up and they're like, well, you've lived a long life. I think it's time for you to go. So,
And we have this idea of we can prolong life forever. First of all, that is a question whether or not we can prolong life infinitely. Like there's a lot of different theories of why people die, why people age. For a long time, people were like, it's telomeres, it's telomeres. Well, apparently it's partially telomeres, but not entirely just telomeres. Eventually, the world is going to come to an end. Eventually, the universe will experience its own heat death, which is the prevailing theory of what will happen. We'll just spread out so far in like a trillion years that all matter will break up and entropy will reign. Um, and everything will be dead. Nothing could exist anymore as atoms will break apart.
and then
Atoms.
something new will come along after that. And there'll probably be a new version of life. Governments and organizations, people, religions, all have a certain threshold for what they consider to be in any given situation an acceptable amount of loss of life, whether it's militarily, whether it's a civilian population under a pandemic, whether it's a disease or a health situation like cancer that there's a certain amount of effort they'll put into resolving, and then at some point they'll just accept the fact that certain people are going to die because of that.
It, margin of error, which is the weird thing about it, is like you can't have 100% success rate on anything. Um,
Yeah,
and that's
and there's economics around that, right? Especially with like the insurance industry, life insurance, health insurance. Um,
well, it's not economics. That's just basic science. You can't have 100% success rate on
right,
any
but it
given
has an
thing.
it has an economic impact because the older you
Oh,
get, the more you pay into health insurance, the more you pay into life insurance. So there's economic impacts, especially when you look at things like death tax and inheritance and all that kind of stuff. Because if a millionaire dies, and I mean the conflict that arises when families have a rich family member that that passes away, and the arguing over assets and money and all that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot of factors that go into death that we just
yeah.
tend to pretend like doesn't exist. Like we say, oh, okay, this person died, how sad, but then all the other shit that comes along with that.
It's weird because I've never actually experienced that in real life. I've seen it in movies all the
Yeah.
time. It's a great movie plot. I just recently, like a few months ago, before we went in lockdown, saw Knives Out, which is kind of has a big moment about them having this will being read of this famous wealthy author,
Mhm.
and just how the chaos that ensues. It's a comedy, so it took it a comedic route. But yeah, you do hear about this a lot of times. Family members suing family members
Yeah. Yeah.
over
Yeah.
getting rights
Exactly.
to things, and
So my family had a situation like that. Without getting too detailed or too personal, a member of my family, let's say my dad's father, was was pretty well off. And from my understanding, of course, all the details have been kind of kept from me because I've been an outsider, living in a different location and everything. But from my understanding, um, a majority of the inheritance went to a certain group of family members. Let's say not my father or my mother or anybody, and none of it trickled down to me, but it certainly trickled down to other relatives of mine that are much better off because of it. They got college paid for. Um, so there's inequity in the way things are divvied up after someone dies. Um, that's sort of a materialist sort of
yeah,
perspective on death.
And then I have like the opposite when someone in my family died. We'll say my mother's mother.
Okay.
When she died, it was everybody like, what do you want? And we just kind of divvied up the inheritance because she didn't really have a will or anything that I know of. So we just divvied everything up evenly and just asked her, like, do you want this? Do you want this? What is it that people want? And all the money just got divvied up evenly for us uh,
That's
down
the
the
true.
line.
That's a true test of the stability of a family relationship is how much infighting is there when the rich person dies, right?
Yeah.
Because
Well, my grandmother wasn't that rich. I'm just going to
well,
be honest. She had
yeah,
some accumulation, but it wasn't enough to really be like fighting over, I would say.
maybe there's a correlation there. The higher the stakes, the more conflict will
Yeah.
arise.
Yeah.
There's a correlation or a causation there. I would assume that when the stakes are higher, people are willing to be more aggressive in their attempts to
Yeah.
benefit as much as
Yeah.
possible. Yeah. I had a girlfriend, I won't say her name, worked in a,
What would we call her?
huh?
Well, just give her a fake name.
Uh, I don't know, girlfriend number 12, I guess.
Adam is great at coming up with names that she can tell.
More better. Yeah, more
He
better.
couldn't think of like Eve
No,
or
no,
Sally or Sue.
this wasn't an Eve type. Anyway, she was working in a nursing home, and she would say that like family members would come in to visit their elderly relatives in order to solidify their inheritance. Like the only reason they would visit is to confirm that, like, okay, when you die, I'm gonna get X, Y, or Z, right? And
Yeah.
visit was for that purpose, not to say, how are you doing? Do you need anything? Do you want to go out for a walk? Do you need to go to the park? Do you need to go to the doctor? Is there anything that you want to know? I'm visiting to make sure that when you die, my inheritance is secured. That's pretty much like sign this paperwork, sign this will, sign whatever it is. And that's pretty much the entire purpose of the visit, which is fucking disgusting. I think that's the reality of the way people treat people in that situation.
Yep.
It's kind of depressing. I
We
promise
could
this
get
wasn't
into
going to be a
all,
depressing podcast.
yeah. We could continue on a whole topic about wealth and money and what is the root of all evil, which of course is Red Sox fans. No, that's a joke.
Some cultures seem to look at death in a positive light, like they celebrate it, like they celebrate the successful completion of a life. They celebrate the moving on. They celebrate the crossing over in some
Yeah.
religions and some cultures. We seem to, well, I think humans in general seem to have like a basic fear of it. Maybe the celebration is a overcompensation of the fear. You know what I mean?
Well, I think I don't know if it's necessarily overcompensation of the fear. It could just be a different way of looking at it. It is true when you see like a 12-year-old die, there's not really a celebration going on.
Yeah.
You don't celebrate a 12-year-old's death. But
Right.
when you see like a 90-year-old or a 100-year-old person die, the funeral looks totally different.
Yeah.
I've been to funerals of kids or call it or like high school and middle school kids, and I've been to funerals of 90-plus-year-olds, and it's amazingly different. Where one is just really sad,
Yeah.
for obvious reasons, and the
Yeah.
other is like a celebration of their life. Or we talk about celebration of life, and I've seen like a 90. I remember going to a funeral of a 99-year-old, and oh my goodness, was it such an upbeat, positive celebration of their life.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's
Almost,
a big difference
it's almost
too.
like you. Yeah. If it's somebody who's younger, it's like you never even get a chance to really get started. If it's somebody who's
Yeah,
older, it's like, wow, congratulations, you
yeah,
uh did well. Did
yeah.
well. You
Once
made
you
a
hit,
long way.
yeah, once you hit the 80s, it's like you feel more. I mean, it's not like people aren't sad, but it's a lot easier than someone who's in their 20s or 30s. And then when they're in their 50s, you're like, oh, well, you got to live a life, but that wasn't that long of a life. Do we celebrate or do we Do we get sad because we have this idea of how long you're supposed to live?
Yeah, and I think we have like a like a there's a stigma that we're supposed to be mournful at a funeral regardless of who it is or how long they lived. Like there's like when you're expecting someone older to pass away and then they finally do, um you're still expected to be sort of in this mournful state, even though like you're mentally prepared for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
um there's a social stigma around it, I think. But I don't think some other cultures have that as much.
yeah.
um
There's
it's a Western thing.
yeah, this idea like if you're not crying at the funeral, something's wrong with you.
Yeah,
That's the common thing I see. And what's strange about that is a lot of people don't cry at funerals. I mean, a lot of people do, but there is a decent amount of people who won't cry at a funeral because A, it hasn't hit them yet.
yeah,
B, they're not criers.
yeah.
C, they're just too busy to cry. Or D, something we don't take into account, they're happy the person is dead for one of two
Yeah.
reasons. One reason number one, like I've had people in my family who died after long bouts with cancer,
Mm,
and you're just kind of happy that it's over
yeah,
because it was painful to watch, but not as painful to watch as it was for them to experience.
yeah,
And the other reason why you might be happy that they're dead is because they were terrible to you.
yeah,
Like they were abusive. Like just when kids are in abusive situations, like their father is sexually or physically abusing them, and then that father dies,
yeah,
that is release for the kid. The kid is now safer.
yeah. It's like, oh, I don't have to worry about this person anymore.
Yeah.
I don't have to look at this person. I don't have to be around this person. I don't have to think that this person is somewhere out there. Yeah, totally. That's why I think there's a relief when family members go to prisons to watch, you know, the person who raped and killed their daughter or whatever get euthanized or whatever. There's there's a they're there because they want to witness it and have that sense of relief. Like, okay, this person isn't around anymore. Like justice has been served. Like,
Yeah.
um, good. And that's part of the reason why I'm not exactly opposed to the death penalty. I'm kind of on the fence about the death penalty. Like, should the state have the authority to take someone's life? And then in that situation where something so egregious has been done and somebody's been victimized or even killed because of another person, um, I guess I have like a conservative mindset, like where like, yeah, hang them from the
Yeah.
hang them on the street corner, let everyone see, like, put them in shackles, like fuck it, like,
If justice were blind and it was served evenly across the board, I would be more on board with the death penalty. But let's face it, the people who get the death penalty are sometimes poor and minority
yeah,
people, and they're more likely to get the death penalty than rich white people who do the
yeah,
exact same thing.
yeah, that's totally
Um,
true. Yeah,
and
our
also,
justice
men are
system.
more likely than women to get the death penalty, I believe.
Yeah, our justice
Um,
system is not an equal opportunity.
yeah. Yeah. So, and then how many people get the death penalty who were innocent and actually proven to be innocent by DNA test or proven as best as you can prove it, and they still went through the execution?
Yeah, and you find out after the fact that that happened.
Oh, sometimes before.
Oh, and they still go through with it. I've never heard of that case,
Sometimes
but
they've.
okay.
There was.
If we can provide a citation for that, that'd be
Oh
interesting to
man, I
read.
wish I could provide the citation on this where they're like the prosecution was like, well, we're still going to prosecute him even though we have proven that he was not the person who did it.
Right. That's just completely messed up.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know if that was a death penalty case. I could be wrong. So you might want to just cut all that out because I can't prove it and I don't know how to even
okay.
search for that necessarily.
All
Anyway,
right.
so death penalty, people dying. So
Yep.
funerals.
Funerals. Do you ever feel sorry for the people that work in the funeral home? Like, 'cause
I
sometimes, like, I feel like that at some point they're like numb to it. You know what I mean?
yeah. I have had experience working both in hospitals and having been at funerals in a as a part of my job.
Right. Me too. Me too.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
true. You have too. Neither of us are saying how we've done it.
Right. Right. Right.
I don't know if we're keeping that secret still. I don't know if we've talked about this already.
I don't want to disclose my occupation. So,
Yes, same here. We have
right.
reasons.
Yeah.
We are not spies, but
No.
are we?
But we are doing this podcast at arm's length so that we can sort of protect ourselves in case we say
Yes.
anything that could be, um, let's say, detrimental to our career,
Yeah.
which is
We are
possible.
spies.
I might
Because
say something that's detrimental to my career. I have some thoughts on some things. So
he
anyway,
has thoughts on things, people. Thoughts on things.
you don't
Doesn't
understand the
just talk
magnitude of the thoughts on the things.
that he's thought.
Yeah, on
He has
things.
thoughts on things that he's thought. On things that he's thought.
Yeah, so we
It's
both have some experience with the death industry.
yeah, so we both been there. And from what I've noticed from my experience, and you could probably talk about yours, is like it just becomes a job. It's just
Yeah.
so routine. One of my favorite things on one of my favorite TV shows is Scrubs. I love Scrubs. It's a comedy set in the hospital. If you don't know what it is, if you like kind of uh, slapstick comedy with the backdrop of very serious things, it's the perfect comedy for you. But one of the scenes they talk about the main character who's played by Zach Braff says death is like a coworker and is always there. And so you see the doctors and nurses walking through the hospital through the floor, and then you see death like cloaked and walking as well, and they're like, "Hey, you." Uh, and it's just so true that like death is like a coworker. It's just what you do. It's just common. You
Hmm.
see it and you get used to it. So I don't know if it's necessarily numb or if it's just this is what you do. This is what you got into. So you kind of just get used to it.
Yeah, but from my experience doing what I do, um, because there's almost like a ritual involved. Without getting too specific, there's almost like a ritual involved with whenever I do that, and um, not a religious ritual, just like
But
a.
I'm just like, whenever I do that thing, all funerals have rituals.
Okay,
There's a
well, my portion of the ritual is specific and has a specific purpose. Okay, let's just go with me on this. Anyway, but
that could be you could be anywhere from the person who conducts the sermon to the person who digs the grave.
or a different role altogether.
Yeah,
But
I mean, like,
can I continue, please?
yes. Sorry, I'll
Thank
stop bothering you.
you. So anyway, because it's a ritual, um, it becomes routine, and at some point, it becomes almost like an act, like your somberness towards the family. Um, you have to make it feel genuine, even though you're disconnected because you don't know the person, personally. You don't know the family. You're just there in a role. So you have to basically play it up a little bit
Yeah,
in order to meet the requirements of the job. And I think preachers probably go through that as well, and probably funeral directors and everyone else, they probably go through that as well.
yeah. If you watch close enough, you'll see in the background if you catch like preachers or funeral directors talking to each other, because a lot of times they do know each other because they work
Oh
together,
yeah,
especially in small towns and
yeah,
communities, and they'll be in the back or off to the corner laughing and talking about
football
random
or
things.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because they're just like coworkers who rarely see each other. You
yeah,
know, they see each other once every month or once every few months, and they're just like, "Hey, how you doing?" and chit chatting, getting used to getting caught up again. Whereas everyone else is grieving, so everyone else is like, "This is the ending. This is a world changing event." But
yeah.
for the workers, it's you got to do this job, and then you got to get back to either your family or to do this job again.
Right, because there's paperwork to process, and there's
Yeah,
there's logistics that have to be done. There's
yeah,
vehicles that have to be moved. There's, yeah, all kinds of stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
You
and I
have
know.
to.
I know almost every funeral director in the Nashville area because of what I was doing. Um, and yeah, it's just like that. Like you get to know them by first name, and whenever you see them, how you doing? And then when it's game time, it's game time. So you go out
Yep.
there and you just kind of you do your role, and then
No.
you clock
You
out.
you
So
don't you the smile goes off your face. You're very somber. You
yep,
hit your points, whatever your points are in your job. You can see it. If you've been to more than one funeral, you'll know, especially at least in the US, at least in the US South, which is where we're both more knowledgeable of our um, funerals, I guess.
yeah,
You'll see that there is a pattern to how everything's done, and everything's done the exact same way. Uh, the only difference is whether or not the family's private viewing of the body is before the service or after the service.
right, right. And then of course there's ceremonies are custom tailored to fit the family preferences or whatever. But at the end of the day, your role is still an act. Our friend who we talked about before on the podcast, um, he had ALS. He got diagnosed like a year and a half, almost 2 years ago at this point. But it was a progressive disease that became progressively worse, and he was hospitalized, and he was living in a home and all kinds of stuff. But when he finally passed, first of all, he was extremely courageous because um, towards the end, he had the option of accepting a feeding tube because he couldn't swallow, he couldn't do anything that that doctors and hospitals would do to prolong your life, because that's what their job is, right? Their job is to prolong life as long as possible. So he rejected that because he didn't want to go through the suffering, which who can blame him? But he
Yeah.
in doing that, he knew cognitively that he was basically shortening his time. Um, so that's absolute bravery in the face of death. Like there's no better definition of that than doing that. Um, but when he passed, people in his family are extremely conservative to the point where Donnie wasn't a religious person. All of our experience with Donnie, like me and Jess have known Donnie better and for longer than pretty much anyone else on the planet. And he wasn't religious. He was, I would describe him as agnostic, bordering on atheist. There have been times in high school where he would outright say, I'm an atheist. Then there were other times when he would say, I'm kind of agnostic. So I would describe him best as maybe agnostic. I don't know if you'd agree with that or not.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
But his family being more Southern conservative Christian brought in the head minister of the local Baptist church near the funeral home. And he came in, tell me if I'm wrong, but he basically gave a sermon about how Jesus is the only way to heaven um, at the funeral for someone who is effectively atheist, right? Which is extremely offensive. And it just goes to show how disconnected from reality people can be, even at your own funeral.
Yeah, it was. Now, let's be honest, most funerals in the South are very
Religious,
preaching
yeah.
toward the people at the church to have you change. Um, they want you. They want you to convert.
They want you to be saved. They want to save your soul.
So their goal is to convert the masses, which is always a lot of conservative Southern preachers and probably conservative preachers everywhere. Uh, their goal is to convert, and people are sad at funerals, and this is a perfect time to convert.
Because they're
Um,
vulnerable.
yeah, and that's what you see a lot because I heard one person say one time, "I don't preach about the dead person. I preach to living people because the dead person's already dead. It doesn't matter." Um, that's one way of doing it. That's a common way to do it. And so what we saw at that funeral was exactly what we expected. Um, it was exactly what I expected to see.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it good. Uh, it just is so common to see. It's why you need to be careful, um, especially if that's like really overwhelming to you, because a lot of people don't want to be around, don't go to church for many good reasons,
Yeah.
and going to a funeral can be just the same as going to church, because it's basically three songs in a sermon, right?
Right.
Uh, the songs are generally sad songs. I never understood why they always sing like sad songs at funerals, like really sad and depressing songs that makes everybody want to cry. It's like, do you need any reason to cry?
Yeah, maybe it's to push forward some
Yeah,
emotional reaction or some emotional effect so that people um I don't know, maybe it's the illusion of not the illusion, maybe it's the encouragement of displaying emotion. I don't know.
yeah. It's a very traditional thing. I'm something that may come up is I'm not exactly I do like traditions. I'm not exactly one to follow all traditions just because that's the way you do it. I like to change those up a little bit, especially when it comes to major things like, weddings and funerals. And I feel
Yeah,
like they can
the
be,
once in a lifetime things that you only get once.
yeah,
Unless you
weddings,
get divorced and then remarried, then
yeah,
you get it 5 or 6 times. So
weddings, funerals, baptisms, um, graduations from college,
yeah.
the things you only do once.
Yeah. So
Uh,
if you hijack someone's funeral, then you basically strip the funeral of their entire personality and you've
yeah,
made it about yourself instead of about um, that person. Just kind of messed up.
yeah, and that's why it's you're going to get what you get when you get certain people to do a funeral, and it's gonna be it's gonna be a show. I mean, funerals are shows. It's
Yeah.
there's a way you do a funeral. There are things you do at a funeral, and expectations.
You might even call it a ritual.
Yes,
You might just
that is
call it a
true.
ritual. Um,
And funerals are for the living. They're not for the dead. I mean, that is true. We're not
yeah.
saying that funerals should be exactly for the dead. No, they're for the living. It's just they should not be offensive at all. There are things I've seen preached at funerals that I'm like, that is not what you should talk about. Lazarus is a common thing to talk about at funerals, and I've always found that
Yeah.
very strange.
So I guess we can do a story. My brother committed suicide, not committed suicide. He successfully suicided. I'm not sure what the politically correct term is. They keep changing the terms.
Died by
Um,
suicide is what I hear a lot.
yeah. So let's just say he did that. And that was like, what, 4 years ago, I believe, roughly. And then, of course, you go through all the emotions and all the what ifs and everything else, the questions that you, whenever somebody close to you has it happen. It's actually happened a few more times with people I've known or been relatively close to in the past couple of years since then. But that was like the worst. That was probably the one thing in my life that happened that basically fundamentally changed who I was and my entire worldview and outlook on life and everything. That single event had probably a more profound impact on me than the accumulation of every other significant event that's ever happened to me in my life. Um, so yeah, it was extremely painful process to go through. But now with a more refined outlook or a better, more clear hindsight, I don't know if it's going to sound coarse, but like I almost look at it like if somebody is driven to that point, they must be experiencing an immense amount of suffering. And it may not be medical suffering, it may just be life circumstances that are completely out of control. And so for for him to want to relieve that suffering, I can empathize with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
And and I'm just happy that he's not suffering. Like it sucks that he's not here and it sucks that it happened. And I have all kinds of regrets about questions I could have asked and everything else to prevent it. But um, if he's not suffering whatever he was suffering from, which we don't no, really, honestly, we don't have a whole lot of insight into the situation, but yeah, it's kind of a two-sided coin. Like in one way, I'm glad he's not suffering, but on the other hand, like, could I have prevented it? And if I had prevented it, would he still be suffering, or would he have gotten over whatever it was he was going through, or all kinds of questions um, that you ask in that situation. So I guess really the point of yeah, the whole point of all that was to basically just say, like, should um, is suicide a viable option for people who are at the end of the rope? Like in Futurama, the first episode, when Bender goes in the suicide booth and puts the coin, like, is it that, or like Dr. Kevorkian or whatever? Should it be an option? Like, or should people just be made to live with their suffering?
So that does bring up a lot of questions, good questions. Like one with Dr. Kevorkian, he was doing terminally ill patients. At least
Right.
that's what he was doing. There is some questions as exactly uh, how great he was sticking to his own ethics, but that was his goal, and he did create a lot of right to die policies that are existing now because he made them famous
Right.
um, and important ones. But that it does bring up a question like the can you get better? And sometimes I feel like we want people to live from the religious point of view that I've seen is like people say like miracles can happen, you can be healed. But most people aren't. Like I've seen a lot of people who have like severe cancer or severe schizophrenia or stage 4 cancer, severe schizophrenia, pancreatic cancer, whatever,
Yeah.
uh, things like that.
ALS.
Yeah. Are you going to get better? Are you going to get healed? It is technically possible because it has happened. People with pancreatic cancer have miraculously gone
Recovered.
into remission.
Yeah.
People with ALS, it has happened where they go into full recovery and get all their functioning back.
Yeah.
It's super rare for the ALS. I don't know how rare it is for pancreatic cancer, but it's like really unbelievably rare for the ALS.
Hmm.
And some people have, with severe cases of schizophrenia, have gotten better. It's happened.
Hmm.
It just doesn't happen often. And so it gets into this idea of like, we have this idea that it could get better. Therefore, we should always hold out and wait till the last possible second so that it may get better, which doesn't necessarily, which most time means that it's just you're prolonging suffering.
Right. Right. Right.
We, and we also believe that any life is better. Like the worst life you could live is better than not being alive, which, how do we know that's true?
Right.
We don't. So I don't have any answers for whether or not suicide should be a viable option. I just don't think it's clear cut as
I think that it's more. I think that it's um, in medical situations like what Donnie was going through, or for people with cancer or any other terminally ill um, situation. I think I guess I'm kind of on the side that um, if they're going to suffer more from living than they are from the process of dying, then that's their right to decide for themselves that's what they want to go through. Um, that's a decision that only, like, I'm an individualist, right? So I believe in personal freedom. So you have the freedom to decide for yourself the outcome of your existence. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, but I also think that um, in other situations where it's outright suicide, where financial situations or marriage or whatever life circumstances have brought someone to that point, um, like my brother's situation, I think that is far too widely accepted as the norm, especially within the military. But even outside of that, it's just sort of a thing that happens that people are just kind of numb to at this point. You know, people talk about gun violence being a norm and sort of widely accepted, but suicide is far more widely accepted than gun violence. suicide just flies under the radar because it doesn't affect anybody else, aside from immediate family. You know what I mean? So if there's any societal problem that needs to be addressed, it's that. And yeah, they have the hotline. They have Logic made a song about the 1-800 whatever it is hotline. So people do talk about it occasionally, but all in all, it's kind of one of those, like I said before, elephants in the room that kind of, um, it's there and nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to address it. Nobody wants to do anything to fix it. Nobody wants to unfuck society to make life more livable for more people. You know what I mean? Um, so maybe one of the outcomes that'll come out of this whole COVID thing, maybe a positive thing will come, is that people will be more compassionate towards one another. And I think in the short term, suicide rates will probably escalate as a result of COVID. But I think in the long run, if people are come out of this more compassionate, they may have a more positive effect. There's a lot to unpack there. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where to go with all this. But definitely, like short term, we are going to have some spikes in suicide, especially with healthcare workers.
Yeah.
I think we're not really thinking about them as much, their needs, but they are
Yeah,
they're
they're going through it. They're being put through the ringer right now.
yeah, they're A, getting very little sleep, and B, they're seeing people die, and there's
Yeah.
nothing they can do about it.
Yeah. And there's going to be a form of PTSD to come out of that, the same way that whenever people in combat see a lot of death and destruction around them, um, there's PTSD. They
Yeah,
used to call it shell shock that arises from that.
yeah, and this is definitely going to happen, and it's uh, and for those who are just depressed and either don't realize it or haven't talked about it, and then they're isolated, we don't know what's going to happen when they're like isolated still. Like, we don't hear from people. I assume all of us have a few friends that we've heard nothing about. We don't know if they're still alive or not,
Yeah.
because our forms of communication with them are in person or uh, in certain online ventures, and they're just not there anymore, and we
Yeah.
don't know why. And not all of them are essential workers. Uh,
Yeah.
like, we're not hearing much from our essential workers probably as we used to.
No, people who have lost their jobs or who are working from home and are just stuck, they're going through it right now. They're going through it, and they're like, loneliness is a killer.
And that's going to be, and I think this is going to be shown a lot more. And it's not going to put like a positive spin on death. I don't know if any of this is going to put a positive spin on death.
Well, let's talk
Uh,
about the positive side of death. Let's brighten the
yes,
mood a little bit, shall we?
let's talk about why death is good.
Yeah.
Da-da-da,
The
da-da-da.
segue is terrible. We'll get to the point.
Okay, let's try it again. Okay,
Okay.
I got a second segue. Adam, 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 and
Yeah.
Jess. Present, present, present. A thesis, a thesis, a thesis. On why, on why, on why. Death, 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 death is good.
Good. Okay.
That was terrible. I don't have a good one.
That'll work.
Good segue. But yeah, so there are positive aspects of death. Tell us
Yeah.
all of them, Adam.
Well, if you're a religious person, then you have the hope of moving into um, another life. That's about it. That's all I got.
I mean, yeah.
What do you got?
So things that are death positive. The positive spins on death is I think one, yes, if you're a religious person, there is the beyond begins. Uh, B, being stuck in life after a while will become miserable no matter what. Like, you will get old and frail. We
Mhm.
don't have like bodies that allow us to live forever, which is one of the things we have to overcome that we just haven't yet, and it will take a long time for us to overcome. entropy, basically.
Mm,
I know. Oh no, I'm not using entropy in the correct setting right there,
mm.
because this is not a closed system. Uh, the human body is not a closed system, but it's still, I'm going to use it because I like the word entropy.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, so we cannot live forever. We're going to get, things are going to get harder. And so it's good to have, to not have to be in that situation. And also, one of my favorite things I've seen is Doctor Who. I love the TV show Doctor Who. And in one season of it, there was a character who was healed in such a way that she would always be healed. Her body would always heal. And so she was basically given the gift of living forever. And what happened was she started forgetting things over time, and she had to keep journals so that she could remember her kids and her grandkids and things that happened. And she couldn't remember anything because literally everything happened in front of her. Her mind could not hold it anymore.
Yeah.
And we've never reached the full potential of how much a mind can store. But if you lived for thousands of years, you would. You'd eventually run out. And so that's why dying is good, is because you don't want to go into that space of where your mind is gone. Your physical body's there, but your mind is not made for eternity. Just try, like, basically think about forever right now.
Yeah.
How long is forever?
I mean, for most people, it's probably an inconceivable amount of time. Like forever is isn't
Yeah.
there a song like "Forever is a long time" or something like that?
Yeah.
Um,
And so yeah, we can't think of it. So just imagine if we had to live through it in this body, in our current state.
yeah.
And also, as long as something lasts forever, it's going to be meaningless. Like, what gives us meaning is the fact that we have only a certain amount of time to find that meaning in one
Right.
way.
Right.
Uh,
So that's kind of the approach that I think is most healthy to take, is that at some, there's a progress bar of life, right? And it just kind of speeds up as you get older. It seems like the it loads faster. But if you look at that, whatever time you have left as an opportunity to make it what you want it to be, and you can, it's almost like legacy building. Like you're making sure that the name that you have, um, sort of, you're designing your own funeral, more or less, right?
yeah,
You're designing your own legacy. You're building your own reputation and your own art, your own output to be remembered by future generations. So with some people, that legacy building is kids. With some people, it's art. With some people, it's any other. It's their work. It's their company. It's their, you know, Trump's name will be remembered for a lot long after he's dead, because Trump is plastered on every corner of every city. You know what I mean? So um, yeah, just so if you take that approach to you're building a legacy for yourself, I think there might be a little more enjoyment for the time that you have left than if you're just kind of floating through. Um, if you're floating through life without any sort of direction, especially if you're not
yeah,
driven by yourself, then you really have a whole lot of purpose. You know what I mean?
yeah. And that reminds me of the story of Alfred Nobel. Do you know his story?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so this is I don't know how much of this is factually accurate, so I have not checked this, but from what I hear, it's pretty accurate. So he created dynamite. So the story of Alfred Nobel goes like this: he created a bunch of military explosives, kind of known for creating dynamite, which he may or may not have created. Just something I'm seeing says he may not have created actual dynamite, but he created a lot of things that was used to kill people.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently a newspaper accidentally published his obituary, thought he was dead, and they called him the Merchant of Death,
Wow.
and went on to say like how he made his life and his legacy from killing people.
Right.
And so he did not like that. So what he went on to do was create the Nobel Prize to talk about all the good things that have happened.
Okay.
And he wanted to honor people, and his name is now known not for destruction, but uh, for doing good in the world, in science and literature and peace, and all these different prizes that get awarded every year.
Right. So
Um,
there you go. You just proved my point with that story. You told the story of Alfred Nobel. You proved the point that I was trying to get at. That you're building your own. You're building your own
yeah,
obituary. You're building your own funeral. And I get so irritated when I read people's obituary and there's literally nothing about the person in the obituary. Like, um, you know, person here passed away on April 14th, 2020. Not how he passed away or what led to his death. He's survived by family members, and that's the obituary.
yeah,
Like, and the family members are just names, and especially whenever there's no picture or there's no video, there's no personality to the obituary at all. Like, I would write my own fucking obituary. It would be 2,000 pages long. And it would have every single thought I've ever had in my entire life in it, because I feel like my life has meaning, right? And so I feel like people who care about me should know who I am and should know, like, even if there are thoughts that I don't want kept out in public right now, that I'm not going to put on an in-pencil podcast. I want people when I'm gone to know who I am and to say, okay, this is who he was. He wasn't just Adam, whatever my last name is, whatever and survived by whoever. He was, he had personality. He had influence. He was educated. He had this and that. You know what I mean? Like, these are things that people just completely omit from obituaries. And I read people's obituaries and there's jack shit about the person in there. I just get infuriated because I'm like, okay, I want to know more about this person. And there's nothing available on them at all in the obituary. And especially if you even try and look online, or if you go to like if you go to like a local library of a hometown where somebody passed away, there's like, let's say 100 years ago or whatever, like excuse me, in a city in Kansas where my family is originally from. I go there, I can go to a local historic museum and I can find documents about my family. I can find yearbooks. I can find all kinds of stuff because documents are maintained. So I can know who my family is. I can know about these people. But most people don't have that. Most people don't have this sort of um, documentation, or what we're doing right now. Even this is part of
yeah.
our legacy. So even if we're not really showing our identity right now, people who know us know that this exists, and this will be something that they can look back on after we're gone and know how we felt about certain things. You know what I mean? So, um, fucking obituaries just piss me off because they're just so copy and paste.
Yeah, and I mean, some of it is the reason the reason why they are copy and paste is because of uh, because they're written by the family in the moment of grief, and they're told, "Hey, we need this information,"
Yeah.
and it's really hard. You don't have like time to write a really good obituary. That's the reason why most newspapers' obituaries on famous people are written years in advance. Um,
Yeah. I feel like obituaries, I feel like your legacy, you should be building a legacy. Every moment of your life should be, should be part of your story, and it should be telling something. So that way, whenever you get to the end of your life, whether it's at age 35 or at age 95 or age 125, after we get to that point, because science will prove so, not really, but exaggeratingly, um, you'll have a story to tell. There'll be a story there for you, and not just, well, he kind of just floated through life, just kind of didn't really direct his, wasn't in control of his own. Yeah, I would hate that. I would hate to be somebody who has absolutely no control over my own life and no say into my obituary and no say into how people remember me. Like, fuck that. What's the purpose of life then? Why am I here? If that's the result, why am I here? What is my meaning? Let's kind of go back to our religious talk. Like, religion gives people meaning because people refuse to give themselves meaning. You know?
Well, I don't think people are refusing to give themselves meaning. They find their meaning in religion. That's the meaning they give themselves.
Well, yeah, but then, okay, you're known as Bob the Christian. What else? What else is there about you?
Well, I mean, that's the thing about identity is our identity has to be used in things that people understand. We just can't make up words and say,
Yeah, we need to do an episode on identity because I have a lot to say.
yeah. And we get into like,
Write
I
that
am
down.
chess, I am blah, 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 blah.
So those are kind of my thoughts on death. I think that it can be a positive thing, but I think the society takes it to be mainly negative, partly because there's a fear of death and partly because we mismanage it.
So final thoughts really on it is like, yeah, we're afraid of death, but it's gonna happen. Even if you are able to do cryopreservation and they fix it and you come back in the future, hey, what a culture shock that will be that we didn't even get into. But you'll eventually die again. You can't
Yeah,
stop death
yeah,
one way or another because it's just the way it is. Everybody has to die. Um, as they
yeah.
as they say, uh, death and taxes are the only certainties. Uh,
But what does that mean for us now? And I guess my final thoughts are okay, so once you accept the fact that this is an inevitability, you can manipulate your life and you can script your life and forecast your life in a way that has the most meaning to you and provides you with the things that are most important to you and gives you the ability to write your own story and build your own legacy, because really I feel like that's the whole mission here. While what else would we be doing with our time
yeah.
aside from working in a call center or
Yes.
on an assembly line? So
Life is. I hate the phrase "life is short." Um,
thanks, John Rubin.
uh, well, I don't like it because I saw somebody say one time, and I thought it was the best thing ever. Someone said, "Life is short," and they said, "False. It's the longest thing you'll ever experience."
Well, there's some
I was
truth
like,
to that.
"Oh
There.
well, that's true." But life, you're given a time. You don't know what the time is, but you're given a time, and you can do with it, and you can find what you want. You can find your meaning. Um, there are a lot of things that we can't do. I can't be president of the U.S. I know that, but I can find my own meaning in who I want to be.
Yeah.
I want to be a neurosurgeon. I
Your
know
dog wants
that.
to go out.
Yes, my dog wants to go.
All right, with that, we're gonna wrap up. Thank you for listening. We're gonna phase into the outro right now.